It's 6:01. I'm going to call the meeting of Planning and Zoning Subcommittee to order for June 10th, 2026. And I will ask for attendance. Council Arbiani,
Yes.
Council Bruno,
Here.
Council Long here. Tonight, we have a very brief agenda. We don't have any minutes. I will entertain public comment, participation, just if it's outside of this discussion only in brief. We have our guest, Jeff Roloff, the attorney for the developer that has proposed some zoning regulations and has a zoning map to show. And beyond that, we have any counselor reports or any other new business, but this is the only business on the agenda tonight was Edmonds Road, J and Co project, and the proposed zoning by the developer, which is, this is only the beginning of a planning process. So having said that, I do see a couple of hands here. Jerry, I know it's you. If you would like to speak. Mr. Bloomfield? Yes, I can hear you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Of course.
How's everybody? Okay?
Yep, we're fine.
Okay, good. I have a list of things. I'll try and be brief, but
this is outside of this discussion, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I
3
think.
minutes.
I think. Signs are all over Knobscott. Note to rezoning Knobscott. What would be the rezoning?
No, Jerry, excuse me, that's part of this discussion. If you have an item outside of this discussion.
I don't know what that would be, Christine.
Anything that's not.
What?
Anything that's not relative to this particular project.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought this project was all you're talking about.
Yes, but I'm taking public participation for any items outside of this.
You mean I could talk about other issues? I could talk about other city issues altogether?
No. So why don't you just not talk and then I'll recognize you when we start the discussion, okay?
That sounds fine. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chasen, as long as it's outside of this discussion, 3 minutes.
No, I misunderstood. So this is the project.
Okay. All right.
I'll talk later, correct?
Yes, later.
Okay.
All right, what just happened to my screen?
This iPhone 12, 15.
Yeah, no, I just lost the list of participants.
There's one hand raised.
Yeah, no, I see that. I'm just saying my screen got messed up. Okay, iPhone 12, 15, do you have something other than this discussion?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No, I wanted to talk about this particular subject, so I can talk later.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, that takes care of that. All right, so tonight we are going to discuss the zoning for this parcel for the proposed overlay district, I'll call it. I have not reviewed the zoning prior to the past week that was submitted by the developer's attorney, Mr. Roloff. And after reviewing it, I found that it doesn't really match any of our current initiatives or the way Framingham would want to rezone the property. I had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, had to do with dimensional setbacks, has to do with open space, it has to do with just in general, the way the zoning was written was definitely slanted towards the developer redeveloping this parcel for that purpose only. And that's not typically how Framingham does zoning. So I actually have redrafted it. I have not finished redrafting it, but I'm working with some other participants in Framingham that are planners to work on the zoning, and I encourage everybody who's attending this meeting to involve themselves in the planning process rather than the opposite of allowing planning to take place without your involvement. So I guess that's what I would say to that. So we all know this site's going to get developed one way or another. There are owners that own this site. And if we don't take the opportunity to do some planning, then they're going to do it for us, whether we like it or not. So I think this is a good opportunity. Zoning is something that's always in flux. We haven't really looked at zoning for this site in a decade, and there's a lot of studies that point to housing, and of course, economies change, markets change, and as we all know, revenues are short in Framingham right now. So I really need economic development, and this could play a big piece to assisting us towards that relief that taxpayers need. So having said that, I'm going to actually ask if either one of the counselors have comments or if Mr. Sarkeesian, our Economic Development Director, has any comments prior to Mr. Roloff, Attorney Roloff, presenting his material.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna wait and allow the applicant to make a presentation first.
Okay. Counselor Albiani or Liam Bruno?
Same here for me, Councilor Long. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, and
me too.
Okay, so I'm going to allow the attorney to do some presentation of material prior to taking any comments.
Okay, thank you. Jeff Roloff's here on behalf of Janco. If I could just share my screen, I'm going to pull up the provisions that we
sorry.
submitted, the drafts. Let me get to first the proposed map. So the area that we're talking about rezoning, whether it's a new district or an overlay district, the area that we had contemplated was this area in orange, basically abutting the B4 district to the west. Getting into the provisions themselves, I'm a little surprised to hear that you think the provisions I submitted are slanted towards my client. I understand that would be the expectation. What we tried to do through these provisions was to accommodate the concept that has resulted from a lot of outreach over the last 2-3 years. So we didn't come into that process with this set of zoning provisions. It would have looked a lot different had we done that. We tried to accommodate the comments and feedback that we got with our meetings with the residents and city officials, et cetera. And I think it's reflected in the provisions, but maybe I'll just walk through the structure of what I submitted. And then if you have any questions, feel free. But I tried to model this after sort of your typical zoning bylaw approach for a new district, starting out with a stated purpose. I won't get into the details here, but just the framework. The stated purpose here is it's really to provide a mixed type of housing units and to support Knobscot more generally, and to do it in a way that's consistent with the neighborhood. We would identify this is a special permit process being proposed here for any development within this district. So we would have to identify a special permit granting authority, the SPGA. This draft specifies the planning board, but obviously if the city council wanted to be the special permit granting authority, it could choose to do that and to identify itself as the special permit granting authority. I will note, though, that as written here, any project in this district would also require site plan approval by the planning board. So if the SPGA was different than the planning board, there would be 2 parallel permitting paths to get anything approved. A few definitions, not really too important, but I'll just point out the way it's contemplated is that an applicant would come in with a special permit application for a development project within a certain area within the district. So on the map that I showed you previously, my client, for example, does not control all of the land within this district, right? There are residential properties here and over here that are independent I don't know if my client will ever secure control over those. So if they were to come in with a special permit application, it would be for a subset of the entire district. And then all of the requirements would apply to that, what I call in these provisions, the special permit area. Permitted uses, another section. It's a typical structure for zoning districts. And here, basically, what we're trying to make clear is that any properties within this district can continue to do anything that's currently allowed under the R4 district. So adopting this zoning wouldn't change any of the rights that property owners in the district currently have. They could also apply for a special permit to do a Knobscot residential development through a special permit. And the uses would be limited to residential only, and those are identified in this section. Including senior housing, such as assisted living, congregate living, independent living, or similar senior housing. The development concept that we've been talking about does not include any assisted living. It's age-restricted units only. What we've heard is that there are plenty of other assisted living opportunities within Knobscot, so that doesn't seem to be a use that's worth pursuing within this area, but we thought the zoning should allow that flexibility for the future. Dimensional regulations, what we're trying to do here is to provide minimum requirements, dimensional requirements. The special permit granting authority will also have some control over the dimensional requirements. So, for example, a project might not be sufficient to meet the minimum setback requirement. For example, if the special permit granting authority has a particular concern about some aspect of the project and feels that it needs to be further from the property line than what's being proposed, even if it meets the setback requirement, the special permit granting authority would have the authority in that circumstance to require a larger setback, for example. But these are the minimum parameters that we were trying to identify here. There'd be a density limit, 15 units per acre. I think the concept that we've been discussing is actually less than that. The setbacks vary from depending on what area of the property that you're in. So let me just scroll down to the different sub areas within the district as we've proposed them. So the sub areas are the two streetscapes. This would be areas A and B, are the streetscapes along Edmonds and the streetscape along Edgell. And those areas are defined as the portion of the district within 100 feet of those roadways. We've provided different dimensional requirements for those activities, as well as limitations on the types of buildings that can be proposed within those areas. The goal being to maintain the rural streetscape and character along the roadways. Area C is the brown area to the left, which abuts all the Lavoli properties. That's 150 feet off of that property, has its own set of special regulations, different setback requirements, again, limitations on the types of buildings that can be proposed. And then the area in the middle is the broader area referred to as Area D. So going back up to the dimensional controls, if you've had a chance to go through this, you'll see again that they are carved out area by area. So the setbacks for areas A and B, which are the streetscape areas, we propose a 30-foot setback from the roadways, which is consistent with the R4 zoning requirements. We restricted building types to 1, 2, and 3 family dwellings only. So no 5-plexes or 6-plexes along those streetscapes. A maximum building height of 2.5 stories and 35 feet. The R4 zoning is, the R4 zoning is 3 stories and 35
feet.
Yep. And then we're proposing, a landscape buffer with restrictions on what can be done within 30 feet of each of these roadways. And again, these requirements and limitations as to what you can do there are aimed at protecting the rural streetscape. Area C is the area adjacent to the Livoli properties. We're proposing a minimum building setback there of 80 feet, a limitation on the types of buildings to basically what you would normally consider single families, duplexes, and townhomes up to 6 units, but with a maximum building height of 2.5 stories, 35 feet, a landscape buffer of which includes 50 feet being an area that needs to be maintained as natural vegetation. So that's in addition to the 80-foot building setback. And obviously the idea there, as we've talked about before, is to provide a meaningful vegetative buffer for purposes of screening those properties. And by limiting the building types, also establishing a development character that's going to look residential in the event that anybody can see through the screen that's being maintained there. And then area D is the central area of the site. That is the area in which we've proposed the multifamily buildings. The goal there was to allow these buildings to be pushed as closer to the B4 boundaries, further from Livoli. So we proposed a smaller setback to the boundaries of this district, allowing all building types that are defined above. Again, limited to residential uses, 3 stories, 40 feet, calculated in the way it's done for the B4 district, and then a smaller but still a meaningful landscape buffer. And I'll just point out that for the current zoning, if somebody were to cut a subdivision road through here, there is no landscape buffer requirement. Homeowners, single-family homeowners could clear right to the property line. There's no requirement for maintaining vegetation or providing a vegetative screen, but that would be provided here. Open space, the concept that we had proposed before actually included an open space area of close to 70%. I think it was 67%, but we're proposing in these zoning provisions at least a minimum of 50%, using the terms, the open space terms as they're already defined in the bylaw. And then we've got provisions that just make it clear that all of these requirements have to be met and complied with through the entire special permit area, not necessarily within individual phases. So for example, if my client were to come in with a special permit application and wanted to start with a phase 1 that only consisted of some part of the development rather than coming in and doing the entire thing at once, all of these requirements that we've been going through would apply to this special permit area, not necessarily individual segments or phases of that area. We go on to establish parking requirements. We think these are consistent with other provisions in the zoning. Age restriction requirements. What we tried to do here with the age restriction, I think we've talked about this at the last meeting, is depending on who the operator might be for the age restricted units. Some age restricted communities are 62 and older. Others are 55 and older. Some prohibit children completely and others don't. And so there are a lot of different ways that these age restricted developments can be operated and constructed and restricted. So again, we propose a minimum standard here that would require occupancy of at least one adult, 55 years or older. But if an operator came in, or if the special permit applicant wanted to impose something more stringent than that, they could do that. But this would allow for the flexibility to come in with a different operational design. The affordability requirements, these provisions tie into the city's inclusionary housing units, but trying to provide some flexibility as to how those would be met. So rather than, we know there's always a preference for establishing those on site. We wanted to provide the opportunity to at least give the special permit granting authority and the applicant to entertain other possibilities if they made sense to do that. So you can see we've included the possibility of providing affordable units offsite within 5 miles, a payment in lieu, donation of this of certain land to the city in lieu. So it's just again trying to provide some flexibility, but ultimately to be, nothing to be accepted unless the special permit granting authority thought it made sense. Design requirements. So the design requirements were a little tricky because the city already has a lot of design requirements in its zoning ordinance under the site plan review provisions. We tried to incorporate here sort of the key provisions that we thought were most relevant to this development in a particular way. But if you were to go to the site plan review provisions of the zoning ordinance, you'll see that there are a lot more design elements and requirements already in the zoning ordinance that would be applicable to any special permit project under these provisions. And then going further into this, it's just clarifying the special permit requirements and the procedures, calling for pre-application tech review meetings and community outreach meetings. We know that that's important and something that's been requested. The special permit findings are referenced here. I mentioned at the last meeting, I actually included the special permit findings, which are and requirements that have to be met for any special permit project in Framingham. Those are spelled out in detail already in the existing zoning ordinance, and they're in place to protect the surrounding neighborhood. So they're particular to the location where the project is being proposed, and those standards are referenced here. I didn't think it made sense to just cut and paste those into these provisions because it's easy enough to refer to them, and they're pretty comprehensive findings. I did attach to the provisions that I submitted excerpts from the zoning ordinance, which included those findings, just so that everyone could see for themselves that, that the criteria that have to be met in order to get a special permit are comprehensively laid out, and they give the special permit granting authority a lot of discretion as to making findings and determining whether or not a project meets all of those criteria. Special permit application requirements. So just basically, these are in addition to the procedural requirements and site plan review filing requirements already in the ordinance. But again, just another set of requirements to make sure that the special permit granting authority and the public are going to see and get the information they need to really be able to evaluate the project. Identifying that peer review is appropriate for this project. The applicant will be paying for peer review consultants to work on behalf of the special permit granting authority. And here we are with the special permit criteria. I did include a notation that there are a few other sections of the ordinance that are going to have to be tinkered with just to reference these provisions. But the substantive provisions would be as laid out in what I've already submitted. So again, these are the excerpts from the current zoning ordinance. I'm just going to spend 2 minutes going through here quickly.
Can I just say one thing before you keep going?
Yep.
Things that I will not want in an ordinance is payment in lieu. Forget about that. We've gone through that before, and we wanted to develop the units on site. So I'm taking that out. No variances will be allowed. There's no 40-foot commercials buildings that will be in this site because this is strictly residential. 40 feet is the commercials. You pull that off of B4 zoning, which includes commercial, so that would not be included. So there's a lot of provisions on the Knobscot Village zoning that, because it's a mixed use zoning, that would not be applicable to this. And I have a lot of other criticisms or whatever. I mean, some of it's okay, but it's just the way this is written is definitely not written the way we would intend as the city of Framingham for this to be a residential. I would not call this a redevelopment or a planned development. I would call this the Knobscot Residential Overlay District. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. You're going to have, there's going to be a lot of feedback, I think, on these provisions. We anticipated that. I never expected to file this and have everyone sort of react by saying, oh, this looks great. I mean, I did my best to reflect
Oh,
back
I'm not saying
all,
you didn't. I'm just
I
saying
did
that,
my best to reflect the feedback and concerns that were expressed to us. I tied it into the concept that I thought people were starting to, at least some people were starting to get behind. We look forward to working with you to make this a better set of zoning provisions. And I think the question for the subcommittee is, how much do you want to do before you get this into a format, into a posture in front of the full city council?
so
Right?
I'll tell you right now what's going to
Okay.
happen with this, the way this process is going to work. This is going to stay here the same way we just did Clark's Hill, the same way we just did Eagle Rock, and the same way we do all our zoning. It will stay in the subcommittee until we have a document that's ready to go to the council for a vote for a public hearing, but it will not leave this subcommittee until that time. So I can't predict how long that's going to be. I can just tell you it's not going to get shoved off to the city council for anything other than a vote for public hearing when we're ready to have it. Just the way this finance committee prepares finance reports for the council, because bringing this to the council in a fractured form will just prolong this to go on forever and we'll never get anywhere. So this committee will do the work to write the zoning and to prepare it for a public hearing, and then it will go to the city council, and then it will get advertised for public hearing, but not until that time. And this will include public participation, which is important to this process. So we'll schedule lots of meetings, we'll have in-person meetings, but it's not going to be a speedy process, I can assure you.
Counselor Long, the only question I have is when you say this work will be done with the subcommittee, are you talking about right now before it goes up to the city council?
Yes,
Or
it's
because if
not
it
going.
goes to the city council, they're going to refer it right back to
No,
the
they don't
subcommittee,
have to
right?
refer it back. It's already in the subcommittee, so there's nothing to refer back.
Yeah, except there's nothing pending before the city council yet. I guess that's the difference. It's like,
Right,
do you want,
because
okay,
it's still here,
okay.
all right? Mr. Sarkeesian, you had a question?
No, I didn't know if you wanted some comments, initial
Yeah,
comments.
no, I'm gonna let him finish, but I just wanted to
Okay.
let everybody know what this process is, so they don't think that we're just having a meeting tonight and then I'm sending it to the city council because that's ludicrous. So this is gonna be a work in progress. And just like all other zoning amendments, it takes time to put it together and get it right and make sure that we have vetted all public comments properly before it goes to the city council, because as everybody knows, this has been a comedy of errors, starting from 10 signatures on a petition, which was outrageous, going to an MBTA zoning, which got more outrageous, and we're trying to work with it, trying to work with you, but it's been difficult because the tone for this has been set badly from the get-go 3 or 4 years ago. So, it's going to take time to get the public to understand what's going on and to, I think they're at a point where they want to do some planning because everybody's realizing that something's going to happen. So better to do the planning than to let someone else do the planning for you. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm actually done with the presentation.
Okay, all right, Sarkey.
just some initial comments. You have a 150-foot buffer on Rivoli. Why wouldn't you have the same 150 feet buffer on Edmonds and the other road? I mean, there's a butters on that side of the street too. Why wouldn't you be consistent? I'm just some bullet points. Also, distribution of units. I mean, you talk about townhomes and then you talk about multifamily. Do you have a distribution of how many townhomes are going to be, how many, multifamily units are going to be, or how many units are going to be in a multifamily building? I think that's important that we have a distribution so it's not all, multifamily. I like the townhouse concept. I think it will do well. Um, I don't support the age restriction on the townhouses. I think we need new family homes. I think the community needs new family homes. We don't build enough new family, single family homes. So I could see maybe the age restriction in the multifamily, but I'd like to see, ownership townhomes. And then, of course, the open space that you're talking about, is it just open space around like each unit, or is it true open space? Like, are you going to provide, additional open space around that park, um, that existing park that's there, and enhance that park? So those are some of my initial comments. I agree with Councilor Long on no payment in lieu, no off-site. They should be done on-site. We're falling further and further behind on affordable housing, and I keep, talking about this, but someday it's going to happen, and we're not keeping up with our SHI. So I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, I like to see the devil's in the details. I'd like to see a plan that shows what type of development that you're proposing. And then, I think eventually at some point we should go through a technical review team. I don't know if you want to do that, Christine, but maybe that's something we do.
Yeah, when we get to that point, we're not even close right at the moment, but
And I know the mayor has said this in the beginning, and that is looking for a pad for a future fire station someday. There was
no,
discussion
not on
about.
that site, not on that site,
All
not
right,
on
well, I'm
that.
just telling you that the mayor has been, looking at a future fire station or locate, not to build it now, but to have land dedicated for some type of a, municipal emergency building up there. So those are my initial comments. There's over 37 attendees here, so I'm gonna sit and listen. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And some of your comments were my comments about buffers. Um, one of the other comments I had about the housing is I'd already requested that they have 200 units dedicated to apartments, and I want that number flipped to the opposite way around. So the 100 number, the lower number would be the rentals, and the other number would be townhouses, condos for sale units. And I agree that we need for sale for young people to be able to move here. So that was also the same comment I had. Councilor Ottaviani, did you have a
Christine, can
comment?
you tell me those numbers again? So how many
So this
townhouses?
plan currently shows 357 units, and he has 200 dedicated to multifamily, which I want that reversed. And then the remaining would be rental. I mean, yeah, 200 being multifamily, and then the rest of it would be for sale. And I want those numbers flipped so that the majority would be for sale rather than rental. I'm trying to get away from all the rental.
Mm-hmm.
And also I'm concerned, I want to make sure instead of taking, because we did that on Millwood with the payment in lieu, and then nothing ever gets billed, and it doesn't credit you toward your subsidized housing inventory. So, in order to check all your boxes, you actually need to build the units, and then we actually need the units. So, now I can't see anything. Counselor Ottaviani or Counselor Liam Bruno, do either one of you have comments before I go to the public?
I lowered my hand. I listened to what Saki had to say, Council Long, and I'd like to hear from the public. And it's just a huge contrast. You know what I mean? You look at, I know the devil's in the details, but I know the MOUs and the zoning that came to us from Ms. Garahan for Clarks Hill and for Eagle Rock. They've been in front of the council now for weeks and weeks and weeks, and but it
Year
was
and a
full
half.
council, and we've
Yeah.
made changes at the full council. So that's what happens. And there was no talk of for sale units at Clarks Hill. We got 250 apartments going up there at Clarks Hill, not one for sale, not age restricted or anything. So, I'm concerned about Eagle Rock, and I want to hear more about this. But I I want to hear from the neighbors. I've gotten a couple phone calls, not a lot, got a few emails, but I've gotten a few phone calls about buffers and things like that. Um, you know, that's where I'm at, listening.
Okay, Counselor Liam Bruno.
So I wanted to just basically say the same thing. My concerns were also the Edmonds Road buffer and the ownership being flipped. I think that is, something that I think we need to see. And I have gotten a few calls as well, not a lot, but, when people are just concerned with some of the buffers, And, I really want to hear what folks have to say, but I share everything that you thought, Christine, about, the flipping the numbers and, to that buffer on Edmonds or Starkey. I think you asked the question, but I think we're all asking that same question. Because the people the one particular person I talked to is not necessarily against it, because they do understand fully that something is going to go here, and that their concern is that they don't want to have zero control. So if we can include the neighbors that are direct abutters, in the conversation and keep them where they can get behind something that you put forward, I think it's not just, it's really the only path forward. And it's just what I'm thinking. So that's all that I really just want to add at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to take public comment, and I want to limit to 3 minutes each comment and try to make one comment at one time. And I don't want to hear any criticisms or insulting, or, let's just stick to the matter at hand and be respectful of one another. So having said that, Mr. Bloomfield, I'm going to recognize you, seeing that I recognized you before. Jerry? You have to unmute yourself. Jerry, are you there? Okay, I'm going to go down the list then. Okay, Mr. Chasen.
Okay.
Christine? Okay.
Whoops.
Yep.
Who's talking?
Jerry. Oh, now Jerry's talking. Herb, just hold on. Let him speak.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that, folks, but my phone does its own thing now and then. Before we get too far along, it's all this got to do with affordability. So before all this discussion is over, we need to know what kind of price range these facilities are going to be in terms of whether or not people in Framingham could even afford to live there. There's signs all over Knobscot, no to rezoning Knobscot. People don't know what that means, what their rights are. What are their rights? It's an R zone, I believe, and I don't believe that somebody can just come in and obliterate the zoning without going through a process. And is that process got to do with land court and things of that nature? What would be the board that would be evaluating this? I think I have the answer to that now. And we're squeezing a development between two neighborhoods. Not easily done, with concerns on both sides that are different. What is the park input here? Is there a design to accommodate this development? And what is it, and when would that be determined? Getting into a sensitive area, would there be blasting, like what was done 8 to 10 years ago? Because we were going to put an autistic school in there, and somebody jumped the gun, and they went ahead and started blasting before the purchase and sale agreements were signed and all the other contracts. And before you knew it, 8 months went by, and that whole site on one half of it was blasted to smithereens, and it happened to be a Nipmunk spiritual holy land. So there's some disrespect in that regard. So there's a lot of things here, and there's a degree of not having faith in the developer. And I don't know if this developer was part of the development when the autistic school was going through, or it's somebody of the group. I don't know if they're silent partners. I don't know who's involved here. But it's been ongoing and ongoing and ongoing for a long period of time, putting a lot of stress on the neighborhood there. And here we are again, and now I hear there's some threats by the current developer. I'm not sure if I'm getting the right information. If they decide to resist the development, we're talking about Chapter 40 kind of stuff, like what was proposed recently at Salem End Road, and some kind of a pig farm. And then there's lessons to be learned based on history, honesty, and recent Knobscot promises, like that big building right at the corner that giant apartment house was supposed to be set back and there was supposed to be parking spaces further in the front so they could utilize those spaces in the beginning of the space, the building, that was supposed to be used for business activities. That's not happened. There's one bar room at the end, and that's it. And it's just so many other things that have been going on here. There was supposed to be a third aisle dedicated lane to turn right onto Water Street. That wasn't done. And let's see.
Okay, you have your 3 minutes is done. I'm sorry.
Okay, but there's so much here, and I think what's very important, Christine, is to tell the people what the process is, especially those people that have those out in front of their house. They need to know what to expect and how to protect their legal rights.
Right. I did, Jerry, at the very beginning. I just laid out the process.
I heard that, but it needs to be emphasized more again and again.
Right. Also, I'll just make a comment on the autistic school. That was legally permitted and they had a permit to blast. So they didn't jump the gun. That was going to go in there. So at any rate, all right. Thank you.
Okay, can I speak?
Okay. Yes, you can.
Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
Counselor Long. The developer wants us to rezone 30 acres, pristine acres, based on a single magic number, which is $1.8 million projected annual revenue. But as I pointed out before, this number rests on a razor-thin, incredibly fragile assumption regarding school-age kids. It could go down to 62,000 a year, which is pretty small change. Now, here's the question for Christina, and if Phil and Janet are still there. If you could find out from the developer in what year could we expect Framingham to receive this $1.8 million? When do you expect that? Is that a reasonable question? And okay, trust but verify. I expect, Christine, please require an independent review of your own, of the city's own projected revenue. I think that's called due diligence. So I would please, if you could promise that you would do that to verify this number. Again, trust but verify. All right. Now, here's another question for you. All right, so the question is, okay, this developer has promised 1.8 million, right? Okay, my question, and I think your question is, what is their track record on previous promises? In other words, they must have done building, I assume, and they must have promised revenue. Well, the question is, what's their track record? When I was in remodeling, everybody asked me, every potential customer, Herb, Jason, what is your track record? What have you promised? What have you done? What have you delivered? Okay, I think it's a reasonable question. So please, please, please ask what their track record is. Okay. Also, last quickie, is Jeff Roloff's presentation on the website and your background material for this meeting? Is that yes or no?
Yes.
It
Yes.
is. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are the questions I had.
Thank you very much. Hold on. Okay, phone 1215 Pro Max.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Listen, I've been here living in Framingham since around 1980. My name's Stephen Elias. I live up in Knobscott. There is no affordable housing. New housing that's being built. Nothing's affordable. And Framingham does not need housing. It does not have a housing shortage. Everyone in Framingham already has a place to live. Okay, the housing to be constructed increases Framingham's population even further. 1970s population was 63,000. Today, it's 73,000. That's a 10% increase. 84% of the population works outside of Framingham. That wasn't the case years ago whenever They were making automobiles here in 1989 when General Motors closed. Okay, so I don't understand why we're trying to bring people in. Okay, they have other communities to go to. Another thing is Jeff Roloff. Okay, whenever you listen to him, everything's nice and sweet. Okay, and he just tells everybody what they want to hear. Okay, he'll tell you that we'll have nice windows, so trees and flowers there. But the fact remains that Knobscot must stay single family housing, not 5 units or multifamily, which is multifamily is a misnomer. It should be an apartment, okay, instead of multifamily. The traffic study, that's a farce. There's only 2-lane roads out of Knobscot. That's east, west, north, and south. That hasn't changed since the 1890s. Okay, traffic is terrible now. It'll be horrible later. This monstrosity is built. It's going to get even worse. I work in Dayville, Connecticut. It takes me 55 minutes to get there. 25 minutes of it is getting out of Framingham onto the Mass Pike. That's incredible. This should not be about increasing the tax revenues. It's about the Knobscot staying the way it's supposed to be. Okay? Spending is another issue that the city needs to control. It's sad how Framingham's density has changed over the years, and our city reps have let us down. If you care about your citizens, say no to rezoning. Okay? And just protect us now. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's all I have to say right now.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Okay, Melina List.
Hi, I'm Melina List. Admittedly, I live in District 4, but I work on Edmonds Road and I'm in Knobscot all the time and thought I'd throw my 2 cents in. First off, with whatever gets developed in this area of Knobscot, I just wanted to advocate for housing that is dense enough to support robust public transportation. There's significant research showing that the only way to sort of decar an area and minimize traffic once it's been made car dependent is to support public transit through density. So depending on what sources you look to, that could look as really starting at about 10 units per acre, which is part of the reason why these potential, what we're talking about here excites me. I also wanted to suggest that we take this opportunity to combat the affordable, accessible housing crisis that's happening in Massachusetts for people with disabilities. If you look into even what the state has said about the shortage of housing for people with disabilities, particularly wheelchair users, it's immense. The situation is at a crisis level, frankly. And so I wanted to ask the subcommittee here to start considering how whatever development goes into this parcel could be part of the solution. Maybe there's a universal design concept called visitability, which includes for new construction, or not necessarily front entrances, but 0-step entrances for first floor units. It includes wide doorways. It includes a first floor bathroom that a wheelchair user could get into. And if you think about doing accessible design synergetically with transit in mixed use areas, you have a really amazing opportunity here to frankly shift the paradigm on how disabled people are being left out of housing. So yeah, thanks for what you do. I look forward to seeing how this progresses.
Thank you, and thank you for your comment.
I know. Melina, do you want to be on a board? Can you send
Technically,
me an
I'm
email?
on the 2030 council, but we don't have a quorum.
Okay.
So,
Can you send me your email, please?
On it. Thanks.
Thank you.
right, yep. Yeah, I like that thoughtful. It's funny because right now I'm working on like $1 million worth of accessibility upgrades. So, and I actually did put that comment into my documents and the revisions on this for 0-step entry and other accessibility factors. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay, next, John Master Batista. Welcome. John?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Thank you for recognizing me and thank you for conducting these hearings on a regular basis. And I appreciate everyone on the council and Mr. Sarkeesian being involved. And I know Attorney Roloff's reasonably well through other projects. There are a lot of good comments and so many things, and I have a dozen questions, but Councilor Long and others, I don't expect you to answer this now, but I'm still not clear about what regulatory framework the city would use. Jeff was talking about a special permit that would be designed to accommodate this project, kind of understand that. I think I understand what rezoning would be. I'm still a little bit vague on what an overlay district would be. So if you have a minute to kind of clarify that, even though you've attempted to do that, for some reason my brain isn't absorbing that. But the bigger question is this process, how do we translate all of these comments into a counter proposal or something that says, we think we've got a lot of issues figured out here, but the scale is just too big. And there are not enough reasons for the community to get behind it because you're really not adding to the inventory of public access open space on this parcel. We have a 4 or 5 acre little park there. Why isn't the developer including another 4 or 5 or 10 acres of open space and scaling back from something like 15 units per acre, which is theoretically 15 times what the underlying zoning is. You put in ADU and you get up to 60, you're up to whatever the math is on that. Why is 357 a number that's attractive to the city in terms of revenues when it's clear that the neighbors realize something has to go in there, but it's just too big? And what does too big mean, or what does the right size mean? And how does the city council or whoever the special permit granting authority is get to the right number where we all are equally happy or equally unhappy, because that's what compromise is about? How do we make this process more effective at zeroing in on, okay, 350 is just out of the question. It's just too many. The mix of owner occupied versus rental, off. We need more affordable units, than whatever. So how do we have an effective process so that the residents, that they're our largest stakeholders in this project, more so than even the developer, when you look at all the homes that are going to be directly impacted by blasting and traffic and noise, loss of privacy and so forth, their ownership stake in this community is many millions of dollars more than what the developer has invested so far. What is the process for honoring those interests so that the residents feel they've been heard, not just heard, but city leadership has responded to those concerns in a way we can all agree that, yeah, we wish it would be a park, but that's not possible. So how do we scale back the numbers? How do we figure out what the composition of those numbers are? And how do we get more open space that's available to all of these new neighbors that we're going to have? And I'll stop there.
Thank you, John. I can answer that question. That is through your zoning regulations. That's how you regulate the units per acre, by how you set down your zoning regulations. An overlay district is simply another layer of zoning that's on top of the existing zoning that doesn't change existing zoning that can be used, but it gives you another opportunity for other types of zoning on top of the existing, if that makes sense to you.
That part I understand. I've researched that a bit and I have some
Right.
questions, but I'm not going to get into that now. But I think whatever that regulatory framework is, how do you ensure it honors all of the legitimate interests at stake here? The city's need for or desire for housing, the city's need or desire for more net revenue, and the neighborhood desire for maintaining the character of the neighborhood without overly crowding the neighborhood.
That's your design guidelines, your zoning outline, your regulations in that zoning, that all determines that. So, and that's what takes time. So that doesn't happen overnight. So that takes a lot of thought and a lot of preparation and a lot of public input before you get to that point. So,
and one last how do we ensure that this process is something that is more or less repeatable elsewhere in the city? So anyone living in any neighborhood feels that, any counselor in any district feels that we have a process in place that tries to balance all these legitimate interests, the legitimate interests of the homeowners that have invested a good chunk of their entire life savings in their homes, plus the need for more affordable housing for young families or elder citizens and so forth. It doesn't seem like we as a community have come up with a way to say, you know what, for this parcel, we feel that this is the best fit. Let's let the developer know, if you want to come in here and invest in this, this is our vision for this. It's our vision as a community, not the developer's vision.
So I'm gonna stop you there. So the way that's done is through our master land use plan. So that's the purpose of planning, and it should be done. When I was on the planning board, we were doing this regularly. If you recall, we've done a lot of zoning, but that at any rate, so it needs to be done regularly. Again, zoning isn't something you just put in place and forget about. You need to continually upgrade it and revise it at least every 5 years. And the master land use plan should be revised and updated every 5 years, which has not been done since 2025, should have been done. Anyhow, I'm going to move on to the next one, and thank you for your comments.
Thank you for recognizing me.
Yep, no problem. Lisa Feldman, I'm going to allow you to talk. Lisa?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yep.
Hi, this is Scott and Lisa Feldman together. We're trying to argue not to have any zoning change at all. We have one of those signs up in our house about not changing the zoning. But I want to focus right now my comment on traffic implications, drill into that just for my 3 minutes, okay? The first thing is I want to bring to your attention 2 sections in that background VHB traffic study that we found very illuminating. So I would ask that you and the other counselors take a few minutes to read these sections if you haven't already. The first section I'm referring to is the traffic operations analysis section that starts on page 8, and specifically table 5 on page 10. That's really where I'm focused on. And the second section is the conclusions and recommendations. Now, table 5 shows level of service, LOS, they call it in the report, at the 4-way intersection of Edgell Road and Edmonds Road, Water Street. And the LOS is a grade by the authors given between an A, meaning the best, and F, meaning the worst. Well, currently, that LOS for that intersection is graded as E on a typical weekday morning and D on a typical weekday evening. So having these low grades is really nothing to be proud of. And in our opinion, mitigation steps to raise the LOS grades to an A or B should be undertaken regardless of any new housing development. Lisa, as a retired elementary teacher in Framingham schools, would never accept D's and E's as acceptable standards. Furthermore, this analysis shows that if new housing units are not built, the weekday morning grade over time increases to a D, and the weekday evening grade remains the same. That alone is kind of surprising. But if you do build the units, 357 of them, as proposed, the currently poor LOS of E and D won't change. Only after mitigation is implemented will the LOS improve. But that improvement is really not by much. E goes to D, and D goes to C. A more desirable end state, of course, would be an LOS of grades A or B. So the mitigation strategy to effect this paltry improvement is stated in the conclusions and recommendations section as, quote, signal timing optimization. That's their solution, right? So this begs the question, why hasn't the city approved timing optimization already? Why not implement that now? And if it can't be done now, what makes us have confidence that it'll be done after this development? Further, mitigation steps beyond this signal timing optimization are probably going to include very undesirable steps of changing traffic flows by designating one-way roads, as was done elsewhere in the city. This would result in a degraded living standard for those residing in this neighborhood. If Framingham officials proceed with the development, right, you might as well paint a double yellow line down the middle of Gennardi, Lavoli, and McAdams streets, install speed bumps and traffic lights along with one-way signs, because that's the truth of the impact of your decision. So we respectfully request that this development not be done and that the neighborhood not be rezoned.
All right, thank you.
Your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Carol McGarry.
Hello, this is Carol
Hello,
on Edmonds Road. I'm good. How are you, Christine?
I'm okay. How are you?
Um, so I wanted to first of all thank you for your response to the proposed zoning provisions, because I agree with you that they really are leaving the barn door open for this developer. And they're also not giving enough strength to help the zoning board if they end up ultimately having to, it goes through zoning board or the planning board for final details. They don't even have the regulatory power to do some of the things that people are asking them to do, or to do what's been presented in the conceptual drawings. And I want to mention, for those of us who have been looking at these concepts or have been shown the concepts, we're talking about 357 units, but in the zoning, they're talking about 15 units per acre. Well, that's 450 units, which is exactly what they were proposing during the whole MBTA debacle. So personally, I don't think these zoning provisions were written in good faith. They were really written to advantage the developer and to leave a lot of leeway if they were, for instance, to sell some part of it off to some other entity. So I'm glad to hear, Christine, that you're going to be working on that and cleaning it up. And I think a lot of cleanup has to happen. I appreciate that Mr. Sarkisian had questions about more open space. And I would bring up again that if the city were to allow such dense development, there absolutely will be no way to preserve significant open space. That this really the total unit count has to be much smaller than it is, and that we should be preserving some open space for the residents to enjoy. Adding, for instance, 10 acres of the currently wooded property that connects right up to the park and to the aqueduct, so this becomes an asset to the city and not just a source of traffic and light and noise and all the things that people are concerned about. So thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you for your comments. Karen Margolis, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. First, I want to say that a lot of the things that were concerning me before the meeting started were things that you actually addressed. And some of that had to do with allowing some of the affordable units to be off-site and payment in lieu of taxes and all of that stuff. So I really appreciate you, Councillor Long, in bringing that up, and also Mr. Sarkisian. Those units, in order for us to keep up with, our housing inventory, really do need to be actually provided on site. Otherwise, we're going to start getting behind, and what they're giving us in lieu never, ever adds up to the units. So, I just want to thank you for that. I also appreciate a previous comment regarding visitability, and I've mentioned this in the past, just in terms of making those units usable for people with disabilities and older adults, as people start having more and more mobility problems. So I really appreciate a lot of the comments that came before. So I'm just going to get into a few little technical things. One has to do with open space. First of all, I also appreciate the thought of trying to expand our current park. I think that's something that actually would be beneficial to the community, something that the community can benefit from directly. One of the things that bothers me in the way this is written is it talks about each phase not having to individually provide affordable housing or open space. And I think that's completely wrong. It's the wrong way of going about it. And it just leads to confusion. Another phase comes in and then we're not going to ask them to do 10% affordable. I think as every phase comes in, each section should in fact provide well, now we're talking about 13% affordable. And each section should also meet the open space requirements. I just can't imagine how you're going to review as new sections come in individually. And I appreciate, the talk about 50% open space. And again, each section should be providing that. And there was the definitions of landscape open space and open space usable. When they talk about the 25%, we don't need rooftop. This is not an urban area. We don't need rooftop gardens to count as open space. I think we should just stick with the two definitions: landscape open space, and the 25% can be usable open space. So there are just a lot of things in here that are complicated. All the language about, each phase being able to rely on what a different phase did. I don't think that serves us well. I'm just trying to see, there were a couple of just minor things. I saw there was something there about possibly changing the district, so obviously you'll want that language to go throughout. And I would recommend that the project review remain under one review entity, being the planning board. I think it's just too complicated to have parallel processes going on. I think that's mostly it for me. And I really appreciate being given the opportunity to comment. I think you're doing a great job. And I appreciate many of the other comments that came before.
Thank you, and I will be in touch with you. Also, I agree with you on, that's why I rewrote this, because I don't buy the phasing, and there's just a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. So anyway, thank you, Karen.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, my former planning board member, Shannon Fitzpatrick.
Okay. Thank you. If you hear any funny noises in the background, that's my
Baby.
4-month-old granddaughter.
She's
So,
adorable.
thank you. Thank you for entertaining me. I had to laugh when I got to the open space portion of the proposed zoning, and actually I think it showed a bit of I don't know, ludicrousy to consider front stoops as open space. And as Karen said, rooftop gardens and such. So I don't know what the heck they were trying to pull over us, but come on. That really does not show good faith in my mind. So this open space business just really put a bad taste in my mouth. And I really found that pretty distasteful to broaden the definition of open space to include a front stoop, and to broaden it like that. So my main I have a lot of comments, but you already did address most of them. So thank you for addressing the affordability issue. The density issue has a lot to do with the traffic issue and so forth. But the open space, we're right next to Knobscott, the Pocket Park, which the Garden Club maintains, as you may know. And I'd love to see that expanded. We really do need some meaningful public open space to make this a public asset, as so many of the other people here have mentioned. So that would be my main pitch, is to carve out some really meaningful public open space among some of the other comments that people have made tonight. So let's work towards that. Thanks. I'll be short and sweet.
Thanks so much. Okay, Chris Hawk. Chris?
Hello, Madam Chair. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for calling on me. I'm the owner of Chiropractic Solutions over at 20 Speen Street. I'm just wanting to know if there's any updates on the April meeting that discussed the redevelopment of and purchase of 10 and 20 Speen Street and the development of apartments. Just wondering if you had an update for me, Madam Chair.
Yeah, well, this is another discussion, so that's not on tonight's, but catch up with me offline.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for
All
your
right.
time. And would email be the most appropriate and most convenient?
Yep, call me.
Call you. Yes,
All right.
ma'am. Thank
All
you
right,
so
thank
much.
you.
Have a great night.
Yep, you too. I do not see any more hands. Unless anybody see any more hands? No. I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to know if either one of my co-counselors have any other final comments before we close the meeting. Counselor Adriani, Counselor Bruno.
I'm good, Council.
Okay, Counselor Bruno, any comments?
Yes, sorry about that. I just wanted to say thanks, for everybody coming, and the neighbors. I understand that, this is a heated topic, and I just got an email, and I have to say I just flew in the door at like 5:55 with my grandson, and I was throwing dinner at him, and I was having, how we eat in between, and my camera was on, so I have to totally apologize because I never sit I never do that. And I have the baby, and like my son was coming to pick him up. So I just want to say that to the gentleman, I'm going to respond to his email, but he just sent an email, was very upset with some of the behaviors. And I'm like, I don't do that. So I just want to say if that was a lack of disrespect, show it to people. I don't. That's not me. I was just, like we come in for meetings. Christine, you've been up since 4 this morning, and you get home, you fly in the door, and we get right onto another meeting. And you barely have time to even think and, say hi to your kids and family and forget about eating. That's why you're so skinny. But I not to make a light of it and make a joke, but I
That's
just, for
true.
anybody, but it is so true. But just for, we're just, parents, grandparents, husbands, wives, just trying to, do what's right, for as elected officials that we're in charge of, we're on this zoning committee where we have to make decisions that, if we can have everyone mad at us, I think that's probably good because, half the people are going to agree with you and half are going to not agree with you. So we're just really trying to do the right thing here. And, for folks that are frustrated, I hear you, but I did just want to make that note because if, I never do that. So I just wanted to, apologize and just thank everybody for being here and, the neighbors for, sticking it out with, coming to these meetings and, sharing their thoughts because I think just in closing, this really was a DOA. And I think that a lot of the neighbors the abutters that I had spoke to or just heard from, kind of knew it. And I know the markings went up. They put the red markers where, people came out of their back door and they realized what 30 feet looks off of their house and how close that they really have, you really don't have all those, woods behind you or house lots or a building lot or whatever you call it. They're really not woods. They're somebody's wooded lots. And I have to think that, even if, like I said last time, even if somebody was going to come in and put in 35 houses with more than likely 35 single standalone ADUs or attached, which are now legally, you would have some cluster housing even if you did a single family and that lot would be cleared, it would make no mistake that would be a cleared lot. The developer would go straight in with the excavation team and they would just take down every single tree because that's the way they do it. So that's even, if there's no zoning and if we just say, go build houses and if, these guys could walk and we don't know what then could go there if they decide that. So we're just trying to listen to all. We're trying to, get what's best for this neighborhood and try to, interject because if something goes there that we don't want, then the first people that are going to get blamed for it is going to be the city. We heard it with the golf course with Millwood. For $5 million, we could have bought that at town meeting. That was town meeting, and it lost by a handful of votes. The city could have bought it, $5 million. We could have leased it back to one of the owners of the golf course that wanted to still run it, and the two other owners wanted out. They could have got their money, and the town at that time would have been able to be the one in control of it. And now, I mean, Millwood's nice, but you're talking 1 point whatever $1 million condos. And this is what happens when we don't get control of something. And the last point that I make again and again is the Lockland Ave, where they wanted 13 houses and the neighbors fought it. And when they finally, got through the lawsuits, the owners ended up putting a Dover project, and they cut down every tree, every twig. They didn't leave a blade of grass. They clear cut the lot so you could see from Donna Road to Route 9. And this is a possibility of what could happen. And this is what I think we all just have to kind of keep in the back of our minds. And that's all I wanted to add. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilor Vianney.
Yeah, I just went and looked at my emails because I got the same email Councilor Lee and Bruno did. So I left my house at 6 a.m. this morning, got back at 6 p.m. So my dinner was the popcorn I was eating. So I apologize, but it didn't mean any disrespect to anybody. But I was out of my house at 6 a.m. and most of my day was devoted to Framingham activities that I enjoy and do. I was at a Framingham Business Association meeting this afternoon with Councilor Lee and Bruno. I had a couple other events and meetings, and I work for a living. So I walked in the door, and that was my dinner, eating a couple bags of popcorn. So I apologize, but that's, my wife's on the Cape, my daughter's working at La Cantina, and I'm home by myself eating popcorn. So, and I don't roll my eyes. People know exactly where I stand all the time. I say what I think and what I believe. And Councilor Lee and Bruno hit it out of the park. We want to listen to the neighbors. We want to listen to everybody, but we're gonna get blamed no matter what happens. And that's the old adage. And God rest Tom O'Neill's soul. I was on the zoning board. I voted with him. I supported him. And and there's all other things that are out there that I keep getting people say, I don't do Facebook. Okay. I got enough people that want to know where I am 24/7. I don't post where I am 24/7 on Facebook, but people send me screenshots. But they were talking about Salem End Road. Well, that's going to be a long, drawn out, expensive battle. And it's too bad. It is too bad. But that developer set a price for the land. He had it on the market, and the neighbors fought. And there was no educational component to it at the time. But, the building department ruled that there was. And now there's a huge fight that's going to cost the poor neighbors a lot of money. And it's disappointing it went that way. I would have rather seen, different things over there. But that's where we're at. And, it does concern me because, we talk about the affordable on site. Millwood, they let them get away up there without doing it. Okay, they made Doug Steffen do it. Millwood didn't. Millwood had the perfect opportunity. Those properties in the front that were apartments should have been affordable, and instead they were allowed to keep a 6-family and a 2-family, and it was what it was. But we've learned from those things, and it is what it is. But Constantly and Bruno said it best. I didn't vote on that at town meeting. I stayed away from that because it was soon to be my ex-brother-in-law. However, I had strong concerns. I thought we should keep the golf course and we should buy it, and that the city could have sold the land for the same amount of money, and they could have developed Millwood, and we would have had a 9-hole golf course for nothing. So, and our Park and Recs does a great job, and that was a great community asset, Millwood, and ran by the Drake family for a number of years. I played more golf there than I played anywhere else. I was in a couple golf leagues there. It was a beautiful spot. So, those are my feelings, and I'm concerned because. I know there's been conversations going on for over a year with this, and or farther back, but at
Longer
least
than that.
right. But I think some people have seen the light, but I just don't I don't know where this is going. I sit back here and I'm truly concerned of what's going to happen here. So one way or another. So I'm just here to listen, and I've seen what's happened at Clarks Hill. I've seen what's happening at Eagle Rock. The chiropractor just called in about his concerns where his office is, and we do need housing. So when somebody says we don't need housing, we do need housing. There's no doubt about it. Mr. Sarkisian says it all the time. But, I don't know what is affordable housing anymore because I do this and I see it every day. When you're selling a half a duplex off of Kendall Street for $750,000, I don't know how people stay in Framingham. I'll leave it at that. So those are my thoughts. And I look forward to more discussions. And I know Council Long's put a lot of time and effort into this. And hopefully, we can get to a place that people will be comfortable with.
Well, thank you for your comments. I know we can get there. It's just going to take time. So it takes patience, time, effort, and cooperation from the people that we need to have input from. So planning projects or planning zoning, whatever you're planning, you know, requires public input. So it's not something that's done in a vacuum. Lastly, you know, things change over time. Economics change, public needs change, revenue changes, economic. So things change and you can't expect things to stay the same because they're just not going to. You know, what's that Joni Mitchell song about? They put up a take down trees and put up a parking lot. But anyway, so it's a work in progress and I appreciate everybody who's attended tonight and stay tuned because we'll be scheduling more meetings in the future. So on that note, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second? All those in favor, Counselor Liam Bruno,
Yes.
Counselor Ottaviano,
Yes.
Counselor Long. Yes. Thanks, people.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.